and welcome to the Musicalins podcast with me, Alex Allegra.
And Katie Fee.
I'm currently working on a whole bunch of projects. I'm filming stuff all weekend. I am just gonna throw myself headfirst into... I always used to be like, it has to be perfect or else I'm not gonna put it out onto the internet. And I've kind of gotten over that a little bit and just like throwing myself into this song because I love it so much. So I'm just like, you guys are just gonna get all the content. I'm also going through a bit of a hair journey right now. Not like our friend Sarah, who's going on like a real hair journey, but like my hair has been like super damaged lately. And finally I just broke down because I see all those pros, Prose, like the hair care line that's like customized to you. So you like take this quiz, not sponsored by the way.
Ladies and Tangents have that be a sponsor for a bit or something.
I think
I feel like I've heard them do an ad for that.
But anyways, I went through and did the quiz and was like, you know what? I just feel like my hair after and they say after one wash, like when I tell you I felt a difference after one wash, my hair felt thick again. I was like, holy crap. I finally have a curl cream that doesn't weigh down my hair and like I can actually have some like cute little waves going on. Not right now because it needs to be washed again. But I genuinely am actually like pretty impressed. I've never been that impressed with a hair care line before like I was with this. And I was like, you know what? And the first time you buy, it's like a whole bunch of discounts. So it was pretty cheap and it was cheaper than, and I buy pretty expensive shampoo already. So I was like, I might as well pay for something that's good quality. Cause I just felt like, I don't know if it was just the one bottle, but I used to use, oh gosh, I'm not going to remember now. But like Redken, I've always loved. And like those kinds of brands, which are like $30 a bottle and like salon quality. Yeah. And because that's what my old salons used to use, so I always just used that. But I don't know if it was just when I started dyeing my hair and just didn't realize how damaged it was actually getting, because I thought it was fine. But like, I just see all these split ends all the time, and it just like, I come out of the shower and it feels silky for like one day, and then it just feels gross after that. And I don't want to put a bunch of extra heat in my hair to like curl it every day, because A, that's damaging, and B, I don't have the time for that. So I'm just like, and natural, like, leave in your hair overnight never work. Like, the heatless curls kind of things, like, never work for me. So I am actually pretty happy with this. So I will keep you all updated if you should also buy it, because I love it so far. I'm sleepy. I went to the gym this morning. And then I went, and I've been on a matcha kick lately too. I'm never drinking matcha, but like this bagel shop that I go to has a strawberry matcha, and it's strawberry oat milk with matcha and then strawberry cold foam on top. And once you swirl it all together, it doesn't taste like matcha. It tastes like strawberry, and it's so good and it's healthy. And I just feel like I've been like in a really big like health kick lately. Like I've just been on top of it, but I'm sleepy still. I'm still tired.
I'm just like, I know I said that I had things about the movie Trap for the podcast. I just don't know if it's necessary or not to actually talk about. I mentioned it to Alex sometime this week when we had a co-write of, if you haven't seen Trap, it's the movie where it's like a concert is a FBI like operation to try and catch the serial killer. And I don't know if it's just because we're like in the industry or go to concerts where I'm just, every little inaccuracy about the concert aspect bothered me. So it was like hard to enjoy the movie because of them. Like the lights were still on when the opener was on stage. They mentioned something of like, let's go outside for a little bit. They didn't, but like, I was like, there's no re-entry at concerts. You can't do that. At one point, there's like a surprise guest during the concert, and he comes up through like a thing under the floor, but it's in the middle of the audience. And I was like, is that a thing that they can do? That one, I was like, maybe it's just I've never seen that before, but I seems think it like
depends how they
odd thing.
Yeah.
It's also like they left the hole open for a bit, and I'm like, that doesn't seem logical, because like you'd have to protect people from just walking and falling into it. So it seems like a liability issue to have that be a part of a concert. And then like the movie continues after the concert is over and it's daylight. I was like, why is it the middle of the day?
It's the middle of the day, yeah.
It made me mad. So So I just kept pointing out all these things. I was like, what is happening? This is stupid.
Yeah.
But
I wanted to
yeah.
see that movie, but then Katie was like, it's mid. It's not
I
that
don't
great.
know.
So I was
Yeah,
like, okay,
I
I'm not
don't-
going to bother.
I don't know how much to say without like giving away parts of it, but there's like a
Well, here, spoilers now because I'm not going to
Okay.
watch it. So just explain.
spoiler
yeah,
alert.
if you want to watch it.
It doesn't have anything to do with the serial killer part of it, so it's like mild spoiler. But there is like a fan experience thing where someone gets selected from the audience to go on stage with Lady Raven is the name of the artist, and when like she got picked, her reaction and stuff, I was like, that was me with Taylor. For Rep Room. I'm like, this is just making me think of that. But yeah. But yeah, there was just like little inaccuracy things to like real life, and it was bothering me. So I was like, oh, this sounds like a cool movie because it has music related things, but then it's like psychological thriller-ish, which like love that genre of both movies and books. So I was like, ooh, this looks like a good thing to watch, and then it was underwhelming. So yeah, that's my movie review.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I haven't seen a good psychological thriller in a movie in a while. Like books,
Yeah.
yes.
Books, yes. Frida
Because
McFadden.
Frida McFadden's
So
always a thing.
I've been seeing clips on TikTok of them filming for well, I just mixed two things up.
I was going to say, you're going to say Verity, aren't you? And
Verity,
Colleen.
and that's Colleen Hoover. I've seen clips of that, but they do have the cast announced for The Housemaid, so that is also going to be a thing in the future. So I'm excited for both of those book to film or book to TV adaptations. I think they're both film.
I think so too, yeah.
Okay, because I know Fourth Wing is getting a TV show, so like some get TV, some get movies. So
Yeah, but those books in general are just massive, and you don't really need
Yeah.
the second and the third one to complete the movie experience if they don't
For
want
Housemaid,
to.
yeah. Because Housemaid, you can just do the first one. You don't need the other two. I'd say they're still worth reading just to complete the series. But
haven't
they
read the third
definitely
one.
weren't as good as the original. Second one was still pretty good. Third one, I was like, okay, I'm just completing the series at this point.
That's what I heard.
And then there's a fourth like mini book, which
But I guess you can
I just
also
felt
read
the need
it
to read to
between
complete.
the third one too. Before the third one, it's like the same kind of timeline. Like that's what my mother-in-law said. So
Yeah, I think it might be her wedding.
yeah, it's the wedding, and the wedding happened before
Yeah.
the third one. So
It's
like,
been a minute, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what exactly was when. But yeah, I'm still on Onyx Storm because I haven't had much time to read lately, and then I'll try and read before bed, but there's nights where I'm too tired to do that, so it's been a slow go with that. But yeah, that's where I'm at with books.
yeah, I had to cut back my 50 book try to 30 because I was one under all the time, and so I was like getting frustrated because I just don't have that much time to read right now. And then but 30 I was 4 ahead, so I'm like, who knows, we'll see what I end up doing, because at the end of the year I like blew through 50 and read like 55, so you know, like I might just catch
Right.
up with myself by the end of the year, who knows, but we'll see.
Okay, never mind. This is going to take too long. I was trying to log into Goodreads on my laptop, and I don't remember if it's like which thing it's through, because how you can log in through Amazon and stuff. And it was, I don't know which one it was, so it's fine.
Okay,
Now just pause.
bring
for
us
your-
into
Yes. Okay. So this is going to be part 2 of the DIY production, learning how to produce your own music at home stuff. We did the first part I guess 2 weeks ago. And that was taking you through the beginning of like what equipment you need all the way through editing. And so go ahead and go back and listen to that first before you do this one, because we're starting with mixing and we're doing mixing and mastering on this part 2. So you're going to need to know how to do the actual recording and all that stuff first before you get to this point. Unless you're like mixing a song that's already been produced by someone else. Proceed to listen, I guess. So mixing, I have like a definition to start us off as always. So, mixing music is the art of taking recorded tracks and blending them together to create a balanced sound where all the elements sound pleasant and can be heard clearly. It's the process of music production that makes your raw tracks into a coherent whole that's satisfying to hear and easy to understand. And so, the main tools that are used during this mixing phase of music production are going to be EQ, compression, and reverb. Applying these processors musically is the key to creating a great sounding mix. And mixing is a very difficult skill to learn, so it is going to take time to do. But once you're familiar with the basic concepts, then you can start kind of taking control with like how the tracks are sounding and how they interact with each other in a session. So just be patient with yourself when you're learning, because it does take time and to like really develop that ear to listen to and see how you want to have everything within the words are struggling right now.
Pep it up, pep it up.
Yeah, but it takes it takes a while to really develop that ear and like your ear training for figuring out like the nuances of mixing and figuring out what levels for things. And it's not just levels, there's other parts which we'll get into with it. So it just takes time. So be patient with yourself as you're trying to learn how to mix songs. So when you first start going to mix your song, so you've recorded everything, you've edited all the tracks, and now you're trying to mix them. So you want to start with the busiest section of your song, which is probably going to be the chorus, where there's just a lot of instruments all playing at the same time, and just loop that section. Mixing in this context allows you to hear how different instruments are interacting with each other during the most intense moments of the song, and it serves as an anchor or a reference point that defines the energy and intensity level to which the rest of the song builds to. And so if you get this section right from the start, you're establishing a sonic benchmark for the entire mix. So once you have that section found and you loop it, then what you'll do is you'll just zero everything out. So lower all of the faders to their lowest point so you can start with a clean slate. And the article that I found said then identify the most prominent element in your mix and start there. So probably the lead vocal, and adjust its fader to a level where it's comfortably audible but not overwhelming. I don't know if I'm just remembering my class differently or if we were actually taught different, but I did Intro to DAW at Belmont, and I want to say I remember them having us start just with drums and building upwards. So, I mean, I think just find a way that works best for you. Like, I'm gonna list off a way that I've read about and that I generally do, but I think it's just a matter of finding what is gonna work best for you and then go off of that, because everyone's different as far as their learning process, and it's kind of like how math sometimes has different ways to solve one equation. So
Yeah, they're trying to redo math. They're trying to math. That's what I was gonna say originally. I was like, I don't think that works. The math ain't mathing anymore.
I can't think of specific examples, and we don't need to go into math, but like I feel like there is things taught in school where it's like they teach us one way, and I'm like, but I like this way better, and I'm gonna do it this way, and I get the same answer. So why are you mad at me for not doing it the other way? I still got the same answer. But yeah. So once you get that prominent element, if you are starting with that, then you're going to gradually bring in the supporting instruments one by one. So from here, you could focus on the rhythm section of the drums and bass next and balance with that lead element so they work together harmoniously. The article I found is from Avid, and they suggested to aim for a balance where the loudest elements peak around negative 12 dB to negative 6 dB on your mixer to allow enough headroom for later processing while presenting without presenting distortion. You don't want distortion. This is supposed to avoid that. And you can also look at reference tracks and kind of compare your level relationships with a track that is professionally mixed to kind of see like, okay, well, where on the professionally done track do the drums sit in comparison to the vocals, and kind of use that as a frame of reference while you're going about mixing. So once you're done with the levels part, then you're going to set your instruments in the stereo field. So once they're all dialed in, then you're going to use the panning tool to position each instrument within the stereo field. What is the stereo field? The stereo field is the sonic space between left and right speakers or headphones where sounds are positioned to create a sense of depth and width in a mix, allowing for a more immersive and realistic listening experience. And so panning is the fundamental mixing tool that you are using to dictate where the instrument is heard in the listener's left-right auditory spectrum. And by adjusting it, you're creating that illusion of if the guitar is coming from the left or the bass is centered, things like that. And the spatial manipulation is integral to the mixing process, ensuring that each instrument occupies a unique space in the stereo field for optimal clarity and balance in your audio mix. I like to think of it as where the musicians are on a stage. And I think having that visual kind of helps you figure out where you might want to have them when you're trying to pan. So vocals typically are like front and center. Drums maybe slightly left or right, but still mostly center, and just kind of go from there of having things balanced out left to right.
I didn't think about it like that. That's interesting to like picture a stage and then go from there.
Yeah. I mean, because that's kind of how it is of like how you hear things when you're at a concert is things are left and right and stuff.
Yeah.
You want to be mindful of maintaining the balance though as you're doing this. So after you're done panning, you want to revisit your tracks and ensure that the volume levels are still complementing the overall mix, because panning adjustments can impact the perceived balance. So just making sure that there's not like too many instruments going to the left and then there's like not as many to the right and things like that. So that way it's not like all of a sudden there's so much sound from the left and barely any on the right.
Panning is really like it create like the effect kind of a thing where like when you hear like the like whooshes from like, and it like feels like it's going all around your head and you're like, whoa, like what was that kind of a thing, to like just again with the clarity of it, it's just really making sure like if everything is front and center the whole time, it can get really muddy and clouded, and like then you're hearing like nothing very clearly because everything is just at the same thing, and then like it just is like a big jumbled mess. Whereas if like you have some spatial awareness and panning, then like yes, you're gonna hear it most of the time on both ends, but like sometimes if like you take out a headphone, if you've ever heard like you're missing like little ad lib things every once in a while, it's because like they panned it to one headphone or the other, your right or your left ear.
Right.
And a lot of times you don't get that in like cars and stuff because like it's pretty centered all around and like you hear everything.
Unless it's deliberate, then you can hear.
Yeah, like, and still again with those like big effect kind of things. But then like when you're trying to make it not muddy, sometimes it's just better to like pan things not so that like you have that weird effect, but just so that like then everything gets kind of a shining moment, and then like because you can hear differently with different ears, so then like it might sound balanced because you have a guitar on this side and a bass on this side, so then they're both balancing each other out.
Yeah.
And then you can hear everything and you just don't even realize that you're hearing it out of different ears because you're hearing everything cohesively. So
yeah, and then EQ has to do with that as well, of like trying to have some frequency separation to make sure that things aren't overlapping to the point where it has that muddiness. So that's the next thing, is after that rough mix with the levels and the panning is established, then you want to focus on tonal balance and frequency separation. And EQ or equalization is that tool that you're going to use for that. And so this allows to shape the frequency content of audio signals, removing unwanted frequencies, preventing clashes, and enhancing desired sonic characteristics. And so start by tackling any problems with the frequencies that may be present in your tracks. And so that way, this initial cleanup is vital to prevent the amplification of problematic frequencies and to lay the foundation for a smoother, more controlled mix. So with that, it's called subtractive EQ techniques. And those are to reduce these specific frequencies that are the harsh ones that you don't want to hear. And the way to do that would be to go track by track, so solo a track at a time, and each program's going to look a little different for how the EQ tools look, but basically what you can do is you can boost it and sweep through all the frequencies until you hear a harsh frequency, and then you'll cut it down. Because you got to kind of find where it is. So boosting it will help it stand out more of like, ooh, that sounds bad. Let's lower this so that way it's not being heard.
And those are more going to be like your really high dog squealy ones, right? Like your really low, really muddled, bassy ones that that kind of balance each other out, that are just like these weird outliers.
Right. Yeah.
And then another thing with creating depth and why that's important, I don't know if you're going to get to it later, so if you stop me. No, okay, cool.
I don't know.
So the depth, what spatial awareness and depth and all that stuff is in recording and all that stuff is with things you wouldn't even notice. Like even on TV shows, they'll record like just a blank room sound to get like just frequencies of the room, so that like when you're watching a TV show, it doesn't sound like you're just talking into a microphone. And that's it. Like it makes it so that you feel immersed in the whole environment, and you're like, it's like weird things like that we learned in audio classes about like programming, like where sounds line up and like all this stuff. Because when you take out just like that weird static background noise that like you wouldn't even notice is there, you don't notice it until it's not there, kind of a thing. It's like the weird little like air conditioning or just like tonal noises that like you don't notice unless you're sitting in an empty room completely silent and just like listening for like the weird pops and clicks in the natural world that we live in. Because even when it's silent, it's not really silent. And that's why I forget who did this, but like the sound of like not the song by
Simon and Garfunkel,
not that song, but like there is like a silence song that is like just nothing. But it's not really nothing because your ears start to hear
that like
a
classical.
It is. It's a classical song.
It's like 4 minutes or something long.
So, but it's not really nothing. Like you're hearing nothing, quote unquote, but nothing doesn't really exist.
4:33.
Yes, that is it. So why that kind of stuff is just like you think nothing because you're not hearing a word or you're not hearing a specific sound, but like nothing isn't really nothing because it's just like, so creating that depth when you're listening to a song is to make it feel like you're immersed in the music, and like how that stage kind of setup kind of makes it feel like you're listening to a concert or that kind of stuff. It's like the really weird minute things that like you don't think of until like you have to think of them.
Once you tame the harsh frequencies, you said stuff of like the low end and stuff. That would be the next thing, is removing excessive low end, but also you can have this for the high end as well. A very common like filter that they have with EQ, because there's different filter types, is the high pass filter and the low pass filters, and they're named for like what they allow to pass through. So a high pass filter is going to be used to get rid of those low end frequencies in the mix, and then opposite end low pass filter, get rid of any high end frequencies in the mix. And so especially with like instruments that don't have low end, sometimes it's good to get those frequencies just like cut out just to clear up space. And then same for high end of like, obviously a bass isn't going to need much for high frequencies. So that's another part of the subtractive EQ. And then attenuate resonances. So target and reduce resonant frequencies that could lead to ringing or muddiness. And you'll find these the same way as with the harsh frequencies, of trying to pinpoint them that way and reduce them. Because sometimes just like different instruments have a natural resonancy at different frequencies. I think that's kind of what happened at our round the other night with my guitar. Of, for some reason, like without a capo, D chord kept doing a little bit of a feedback thing in the monitor. So this resonancy is usually like a feedback thing. It is kind of how I think of it, of trying to make sure those aren't happening in the mix at all. And let's see. So then after the subtractive EQ, then you're also going to want to create distinct sonic spaces for each sound in your mix, because sometimes multiple instruments occupy the same frequency range, and that can result in what's called frequency masking, where there's a buildup of frequencies that leads to a harsh or muddy mix. And the EQ helps establish separation and clarity by identifying and reducing overlapping frequency ranges between different tracks or instruments. So if you find two that are like in the same range, then you'll want to boost one and cut the other one to create that space. And then somewhere also in the mix, do the same but opposite. So that way both instruments are able to have their space within the mix. So obviously you don't want to just do the one and then you cut out an instrument. Enhancements. In addition to problem solving, EQ can be used for enhancements by boosting specific frequency ranges to emphasize desired qualities in an audio track. An example is to boost high frequency to add brilliance and clarity to vocals, or boost low to bring out a punch and warmth of the kick drum. So they can be used also for boosting things as well as getting rid of things. And then you want to control dynamics with compression. So dynamics, the variations in volume or intensity, it's pivotal to manage dynamics in order to achieve balances, cohesive, hang on, that's not typed right, a balanced, cohesive, and polished mix. And so the primary tool for handling dynamics is going to be the compression tool. And it works to smooth out volume fluctuations, reducing audio levels when they excess a set threshold. And so that's making sure that any element within the mix isn't overly quiet or loud. And so it results in a more balanced and controlled mix. And they're a valuable tool for shaping the impact of an instrument, such as adding punch to drums or a bass guitar. There's more advanced stuff with compression that I just kind of figured we don't need to go into.
You're loud and you're soft, you're dynamic. Yeah. Just like EQ deals with all your frequencies.
Right.
And then what was the first one that you had? But essentially all this levels. Jargon and like official terms, like it's good to like have that information so that like you understand maybe a little bit of what you're doing. But then really at the end of the day, a lot of this does go with like when I was first learning or anytime I would go to a workshop, it was literally just like it's the same thing like when you're trying out a new guitar, like when you're an acoustic guitar player and you don't know anything about electric guitars, the first time that you pick up an electric guitar, you're going to do it because it sounds nice and it feels nice in your hand, and that's the one that you're going to buy. It's not because it has all these fancy gears and like all these different tonalities when you switch your little levers, like because you don't really know that until you start getting into the nitty-gritty of playing guitar. But like your first couple are probably just because you like the sound. So when you're going into all this stuff to edit and do all these technical things, like, okay, you put that information in your head so that maybe then when you start to play around with it, like it starts to connect some dots, like, but really it's about like, okay, take one EQ line on this track and fly it all the way up. Okay, what just happened? Oh, it put a lot of harsh high frequencies in and it made it sound super distorted. Okay, now go the opposite way. Now what did that do? And then like with the logo and jargon and all that stuff, then it's going to kind of make sense. Okay, oh, so those were high frequencies. Oh, those were low frequencies. Oh, we don't want that. So we're going to put it up. Like it's a lot of just like taking random things, seeing if it sounds good, and then eventually being able to say, oh, I know exactly what, because they're all color coded too a lot of times when you see it.
For the frequencies, there's different colors for,
and you'll know exactly
Logic,
like,
least.
Oh, the yellow goes for this frequency. I know I'm going to bump that up a little bit right there. Like you'll start to really understand how it all fits together after a lot of trial and error. So
So compression, there's more advanced stuff, obviously, of like combining different tracks and having compression for like a set of tracks and things. So that's something that you can look more into once you get to a point where you are comfortable with doing the basics and want to extend your knowledge and go more advanced with it. But for the sake of this, that's all you need to know for compression. The next is the creating space, depth, and dimension to your tracks. So adding ambience and character to your mix by creating ambiance.
Adding ambiance
and character to your mix by creating the illusion of space and depth, transforming your flat audio recording into a 3D soundscape. And so this is achieved by applying spatial processing techniques using modulation and time-based audio effects. Lots of words. Basically, the main one is going to be reverb, which everyone, I think, is at least familiar with the word.
But it gets confused with echo a lot. But
Yeah.
I think we've described what the difference between reverb and echo is in another episode, but I don't remember exactly which one.
You can create the depth with reverb. Main
Katie loves her ambience and her reverb. I'm sorry.
Main elements are often kept in the forefront of the mix, while supporting elements can be placed further away by adding more reverb and reducing their volume. This technique not only enhances the perceived depth, but also helps glue the mix together, creating a more unified and immersive listening experience. Other tricks to make your mix sound 3D are adding saturation to add warmth and character, or modulation, which is also like the chorus effect is what modulation is, to spread the sound wide. Start with a bit of these effects to see how they transform your mix, and kind of just, you can play around with them and such.
Reverb is a really basic technique that, like, even at writers' rounds and stuff, you should be able to ask the sound person, hey, can you add a little reverb to my guitar or my voice? Right. And maybe that's when we've talked about it in the past, is like with those kinds of things. It's just like an added element that just makes it sound a very simple way to make you sound a lot more professional, even in a very basic writer's round situation. So.
Yeah. And then you can add expression with mix automation, which can breathe more life into your mix by using automation to change various audio parameters over time. Mix automation allows for precise adjustments to elements like volume, panning, effects, and EQ on individual tracks or the entire mix. And the primary purpose of this is to enhance the expressiveness, movement, and overall impact of a piece of music. So, for example, if you are looking at a vocal track in a song during a quiet, intimate verse, mix automation can be used to gradually increase the vocal's reverb and delay effects as the singer's emotional delivery intensifies. As the song transitions to a powerful chorus, automation can boost the vocal's volume and add a touch of distortion to create a more impactful and dynamic sound. This creates a sense of movement and allows the producer to emphasize emotional impact when necessary. So basically, like, the automation stuff is kind of like automating these different effects throughout the track, so it's not like you have one set level for an effect for the entire length of the song on the track. You can have it go up and down depending on where you are in the song, because thinking like with compression for like the dynamics, like, you don't want the song to be all at the same level throughout. You want it to start lower and build to the chorus and things like that. I kind of think of
it's a way to rehook your audience, like we have different musical hooks, like from the verse to the bridge to the chorus to the next verse, like all those little musical hooks, but then you need something to even build your music and like the dynamics and everything like that. So like you start at one level, but you have to give your song room to grow, because if it stays at one level, even though it's a big song and all this stuff, like, it's still, those little dynamic levels allow for emotional impacts and allow for the listener to get rehooked again, along with everything else that you use. You got to keep people's attention. Even in a 3-minute song, you got to keep keeping people's attention, like, through any way possible. And this is just another added layer to do that. So.
Right. And I think we mentioned earlier with EQ of automating of like, okay, there's a very impactful like kick drum that hits at this point, make sure it's boosted there, but the kick drum doesn't need to be high throughout the rest of it, so then it will go back down and things. But I feel like the main thing that comes to mind with automating the different parameters is panning. And some like examples of that is, I think of the panning that happens at the beginning of Thriller, where you can hear the footsteps moving I wrote it down, right to left in the soundscape. That's not the right word, but that's one word for it, yeah. And then also like Bohemian Rhapsody, how it pans the vocals on the lines little high and little low from left to right. Those are like very obvious examples of how panning's used, and that's like an automation thing because it's one track and it's moving throughout instead of having the panning be like a static place throughout the entire song. So that's kind of it as far as like the process of going through and mixing, but it's important to remember as you're doing it to take breaks and return with a refreshed perspective that allows you to make more accurate judgments. Whenever you take a break and come back to it, you want to like review the entire track and kind of go through everything before you get into the nitty-gritty of it again, just to see if there's anything you didn't notice the last time you were working on it, and make notes of what you need to kind of focus on.
Yeah, I love the TikToks that it's always like after spending 5 hours in the studio last night editing a song, and then you come back the next morning and it's all garbage.
Yeah. Like, but once finishing a mix, you want to bounce it for the mastering stage. So before exporting, just make sure that it has the appropriate headroom that you're going to need to prevent clipping and distortion during the mastering process. The article I read said to aim for peak levels around -3 dB to -6 dB, and then make sure you determine the appropriate file format and specifications for your export. Bit depth should be like 24-bit or 32-bit depth for optimal quality and flexibility. Sample rate is 44.1 kilohertz for like standard like online distribution and stuff, but it could be higher if you're doing like a film or a hi-fi audio. So just kind of do a quick Google search to see what the standard is.
Those sound like random ass numbers, but they're important because if it's not up to a certain quality, like there's a big difference in what used to be like home studios versus like professional recording studios, because it used to be like home studios could never like, when you listen to the radio, you don't have to like switch the volume up and down for every single song. It's like a very standard, like you set your radio volume and you only really adjust it here and there. But like you aren't like every single song has it like, oh my gosh, this song's so quiet, I need to turn it all the way. Oh, the next song's so loud, I need to turn it all the way down, because most songs have a very standardized like set levels that they stay within, so that like you can just like have it on. And so when home studios in the beginning used to be very noticeable because they didn't have like the mastering and mixing qualities to, and I think this is more a mastering thing, but like to get it within those set ranges, that made it very obvious that like, oh, this is a home studio, because it doesn't have that like nice smoothness of everything being like sounding nice. It's very like muddy and very so like very peaked in certain areas and very like hard to hear in other areas, and like nothing is like smooth. So so you just want to make sure you get the right specifications when you're doing that export. So then that will be, you'll create a stereo mix down of your final mix, ensuring all tracks and automation are rendered into a single stereo file, and make sure that no individual tracks or effects are bypassed or muted unless you do it intentionally, because obviously as you're mixing and stuff, you might be soloing tracks or muting things, so that way you don't need to hear them if you're focusing on something else. But if you want them in the final mix, you can't have them muted when you do the export. So just make sure you got all that how it's supposed to be. So then you have the file that is ready for mastering. I have like a little blip of kind of like the difference between the two, and then just a little bit of mastering stuff, but I'm not going into depth with mastering because it's a very, very difficult, detailed skill. So we're going to stay very surface level. So there's a reason that you can hire a mixing engineer and then a mastering person as well.
Yes.
Like they're two separate things.
So, which I have in the description. Mixing happens during and or after the recording process, and it involves treatment of all the individual tracks that make up the song. Mastering is the process of making final adjustments to the stereo mixdown file to create a master, which is the release-ready version of the song, which we've used the term master on here before when just talking about production and things. These are traditionally done by separate engineers, but now it's very common for producers to mix their own songs and master them. Either way, these two should be treated as separate but related processes, and you can also think of mastering as what provides the glue to give an album a consistent sound across all tracks, like Alex said, with just like radio in general too, of like making sure it's consistent level, so you're not adjusting the volume between songs.
And these masters are also like when people talk about like Taylor Swift and all that stuff, like owning your masters.
Yes.
This final product is what they're talking about. Is that like final, like sonically like fit together, like that is its own thing. So like they don't own every version of the song like in the mixing process, which is why like those re-recordings and stuff like they're allowed to do, because they make edits and they switch things and they like redo it on their own terms. But like the final master is like untouched after that. So
so basically for mastering, you're using similar tools that you used in mixing, such as the EQ and the compression, but it's only for that single stereo file as opposed to the individual track. So you're just focused on the one track now. The stereo file is just a single track. And mastering is very advanced production knowledge, which is why many people just pay professionals to do it, because the learning curve for effective mastering without AI is steep. However, there are AI-assisted tools to guide you through the process. There's plugins that can automate some or all of the mastering technology to allow you to focus on the creative decisions associated with mastering. I know with like Logic and GarageBand, and I'm sure other softwares as well, there's often presets in the mastering that you can use to get started. And I think that's good for people who are just trying to learn to start with a preset and then start customizing from there. For GarageBand, I know like the mastering presets will just be like final mix rock, final mix pop. So they have some for different genres to kind of go based off of what the typical sound is for each genre. Obviously, it's not extensive of, I don't think they have a country one on there even, but that's really all I had for mastering, was kind of just start with presets and the different AI tools and stuff, because it is very complicated to get into the non-AI stuff, but kind of use those tools to help you figure out how to master songs. And that's I didn't have much for mastering because it's just so much. And like I said, like the tools that you use in mixing are also used in mastering, so it's not really necessary for us to go through all of those again. So,
and while mastering is like a very skilled knowledge thing and pay the wages that are earned by people, it is something that like if you did everything else, like that's probably your more costly thing, writing and mixing and doing all that stuff. Getting the master sent over to somebody is probably worth your money if like that's the last piece of the puzzle that you're not confident in, so that you know that at the end you at least have a radio quality ready product that you can.
There's also just like online sources that will do it too. I don't know.
Like that's something you can really outsource to like.
Yeah. Because I think it's Landar. I don't know if that's how you say that, but I know that that was like one of the blogs that I was using for resources, and they're like, use our AI mastering or whatever, and
just be careful
could have something, or
they do have a new mastering thing now.
I think they have it. SoundCloud has some sort of mastering.
It sounded good. Even my master that I already put through, I just listened to it and I was like, it's pretty good, actually.
Yeah. So obviously, like, you want to make sure that don't just like use one of these and just trust that it's good. Listen through and make sure it actually does sound good through like various sources of like monitors and headphones and stuff, and see if it sounds good in different areas. But it is a tool that you can look into to kind of simplify the process, since it is such a complicated thing. So, yeah. But that is mixing and mastering. So now, if you listen to the first episode and this one, you have kind of from top to bottom of how to produce a song for yourself. So if you have questions or any input that you want to add to the conversation, feel free to drop a comment on this video on YouTube or on our socials, or you can email it to us at themusiclenspodcast@gmail.com. Our socials are at The Music Lens Podcast, and you can follow Alex at Alex Allegra Music, and you can follow me at KDV Music on all socials. And we will see you next time. Bye!